we're going to have that sort of obligatory post-cookie panel. I hope we can do more than hand wring and hand wave here. I've got two smart guys who are working on two relatively advanced platforms that they've been building at their respective publishers, working in different content areas. And I really, I feel as if I've been covering this story my entire life of covering digital, is from the days of carriage fees at the portals to the changing algorithms at the social networks, all the ways in which the platforms have yanked around branded publishers over the many years. And yet again, as we're watching the whole basic infrastructure, cookie-based infrastructure of digital being sort of pulled out from beneath a lot of publishers, understanding again how they're going to course correct and how they're really going to assert themselves and their brands within this new atmosphere where it seems as if the platforms write the rules. But these guys may have very different perspectives than I do, but it seems as if we've just been watching media yanked around by the oligopoly for a while. Let me ask Mike and Kodi to introduce themselves. In the way of doing so, please describe the platforms that you guys have built, and they're named. Yours is Veritas, is that right?
Correct.
Is what?
Veritas. Yeah.
Veritas. And
the truth.
And I know yours is Zeus. So you've both chosen humble names for your for your respective platforms. Mike, Kodi, introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you've built at each of your respective publishers.
Sure. Mike Dugan, CTO at GeoMedia. GeoMedia is 3 years old now, but we represent many legacy brands like The Onion. Gizmodo actually turns 20 in July, and other great brands like The Root, Jalopnik, Jezebel. The Veritas platform is our first-party data intelligence platform. It alone is about 9 months old. It took about 3 months to start collecting data, another 3 months just to get parity with our previous DMP that we were using, and then it's been live 3 months now.
Mike?
Great.
Sorry.
Yeah. I was confused for a minute.
That's right, yeah.
Again, Kodi Foster, VP Commercial. So our data platform is actually called WAPO 360. And so I think we've got a little bit of a branding exercise that we'll have to undergo. So WAPO 360 is our CDP, where we're bringing in all of our first-party, subscriber data, and are finding, compelling ways to connect that to our targeting solutions to make and provide more value in how we, target and engage, audience segments across our platform.
Okay, I'm sorry then, I made a mistake, but distinguish that from Zeus.
So
Zeus is a separate platform, is a separate product.
Yeah, so Zeus Prime is our ad network that's connecting local advertisers with local publishers and ultimately trying to eliminate the friction in that buyer-seller connection. As we know, things have gotten over the last 15, 20 years in advertising unbelievably complex. And so Zeus Prime is our technology that we're hoping to allow a more seamless connective tissue between that local to local market.
Okay. Let's level set, because this is something that I don't always understand and get great answers from publishers, which is, what is the state of cookie deprecation now and its impact on your businesses? To what degree are you seeing the impact of, say, the removal of cookies from Safari, the degradation of the click-through data from email? How is it already impacting you guys? And just tell me where we are right now.
Well, the good news is we solved this all at dinner last night.
Okay.
Facts.
No. So for us, a while ago, how is the cookie impacting us? Well, we're leaning into what may happen, will happen inevitably, regulation or otherwise. What is going to happen in Chrome has already happened in Safari. But what I noticed recently, be curious to hear what you're seeing, is 3-4 years ago, whenever it was that ITP, when Safari stopped allowing by default third-party cookies, we were seeing like 3x difference between Chrome CPM and Safari, so like 50 cents to $1.50. Then that shrank to about 2x, and when I checked this last week, it's like they're kind of the same again. And Safari's gone up, and I think it may be the marketplace preparing and doing different things to kind of also lean into the fact that, hey, we should be doing less and less with third-party cookies and more with context and behavior in real time, and not necessarily depend on a long-term relationship with that device or user. So I think that's why we feel confident in our platform, which is entirely context and behavior. And I think we'll get into that a little bit later.
Well, that's interesting. Are you seeing the same thing? Kodi?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Washington Post has always, built their business around first-party data and around, subscribers for quite some time now, well before, I've arrived only a few months ago. And so we feel unbelievably well-placed to navigate the cookie deprecation and to continue just to create more direct connections to our users, to our readers, in a way that'll allow us to continue to ingest that valuable first-party data in a data-compliant and privacy-centered way.
So are you seeing the same effect on CPMs? Are you seeing what Mike is seeing, this idea that the market seems to be adjusting for this and actually shifting some of its buying behaviors so that it's looking at segmentation differently than it did?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, from my viewpoint, I don't think we were really noticing a huge difference really at all.
You never saw the big, you never saw the big differential, CPM differential?
I wouldn't say it was large. I think that it ebbs and flows, and I think that things usually end up sort of averaging out to the mean, as they say. And so it's definitely something to continue to monitor, but it's been really business as usual.
Looking forward, though, what concerns you most? There are a whole bunch of things that are happening all at once. You've got the G4 transition. You've got Chrome losing cookies. You've got privacy regulations coming. What is the thing on the horizon that concerns you most among these that you think might have the most impact?
I have no concerns. No.
Yeah, same.
Okay.
Are we done?
We are bulletproof. I mean, honestly, one of the most immediate concerns I think is even higher level or broader than all that is that, are we going to be in a recession and our advertisers going to pull back advertising dollars? I think that what we're looking to do at WAPO is always to be forward looking and future proof our systems by being as agile and adaptable as possible, and not necessarily being able not necessarily being caught in any current trend or any current immediate, impactful sort of deprecation of cookies or new technology, but being able to sort of bend in the breeze. And I think ultimately, companies that, are doing a lot of the work in-house like we are and building a lot of our own systems, forward-looking from a standpoint of being interoperable and adaptable, I think is going to be very important. Because I don't think there's going to be a silver bullet single solution to solve any of these, issues coming forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that. And I think you use the term hand-wringing, right? I think publishers are hand-wringing to some degree. Some are leaning into it like we are. Others are kind of in a passenger seat. I think the agency on the buy side, we're going to have budgets to spend, and we'll spend it on whatever audiences are available to us. And really the conversation so far seems, to our dismay, to be between Google and the ad tech folks. Mm-hmm. So the concern that we have is, where are publishers in the conversation here, right? Mm-hmm. They'll have roundtables, by they I mean Google, that involve us, but it's really like a request for comments, thank you very much. But really, how is this going to affect Google? I mean, how is, right? That's ultimately what they're looking out for. So this latest transition from Fledge, Flock, or whatever is now called Topics, and it's just very unclear to us how the recipes for our audiences will be cooked. We'll have very little insight into that. And we have an idea because they're our audience. So what are we doing to kind of promote that recipe for an audience segmentation to the buy side, as opposed to going through somebody else?
And that's an important point. I mean, I think publishers really have to become even more actively engaged in those discussions, so that someone else isn't creating a recipe for value for our audiences, because who's going to understand our audiences better than us? And so that, is definitely a concern, or maybe, I don't want to say a concern, maybe it's a consideration that, we're taking very seriously. And I know at WAPO we're going to continue to accelerate our participation in how we're, engaging with, the Googles and the Microsofts of the world, in those discussions, and hoping to, guide those discussions in a meaningful way towards the benefit of the publisher.
How do you do that? What kind of leverage do you have with these guys to get in there?
Oh, I call Fat Tony down in the Brooklyn docks.
Right,
No,
right.
no, I mean, leverage is ultimately, I think, our platforms and our audiences, and I think that I would like to think that it's not something where it is a leverage discussion or negotiation, but a really positive and constructive conversation about how do we collectively build an ecosystem that is ethical and responsible, that provides the trust and that the marketers are looking for, while also protecting the readers. And I honestly do think that all sides want that, but it has to be holistic. It can't be fully weighted in one direction.
Yeah, I would say in terms of leverage, that's a tricky word, right? It's a conversation that we hope to be part of. There are technical tactics.
But when you put it that way, that means you don't have leverage.
No,
you say
well,
it's a conversation we hope to be a part of.
it's true, and we are, and that they've done a fairly decent job of checking that box. But at the end of the day, who are they going to listen to, right? But Cody's right; it's our audience, and we bring that to the table. Like I was going to say, there are technical techniques that you can use to kind of defeat the systems that are there, but I don't know that would necessarily benefit us more than just kind of play along. So I think there are trades that represent us, right? DCN is one. And so just kind of working through them and working with others, and continuing to have one-on-ones with our reps at Google.
I want to drill in a little bit into the ways in which you did build your engines and the decisions that you made and differences among them, because differentiation and how you go to market with particular claims about what your audience and what your systems represent to advertisers is important. So I'd like to spend a couple of minutes drilling into how each of you distinguish your engines from one another, and what decisions you made. Now, Mike, at Veritas, you are leaning into behavior and context. Explain why you did that.
Sure, yeah. So at Geo, we don't have a significant amount of known visitors, right? So our scale is in the unknown visitor. Very loyal, but relatively unknown. Of course, we have newsletter products and we have commenting, but that's de minimis. And so that aside, when you look at regulations and what's coming down the road with cookies, it just seemed clear to us that the way forward was context and behavior when we see them, not get mired in the muddiness of what a third party tells us they saw that device or thing doing before they came to our site. So that's the core of Veritas, is that it's what we see, not what others are telling us that they see. So when we leaned into that, a lot of other things became clear. It was very simple, relatively speaking, to just say, okay, let's look at the taxonomy of the content on our sites. Let's feed that into the system. Let's look at the signals that we're getting from finger movements and mouse movements, and look at geo, but not specific IP. Like, we stay very clear that we're not retaining PII. Even when we use IP for geo, it's scrambled. We don't save it. So all those things we lean into. And of course, do not track signals, the consent signals, we look at those too and discard any of that type of behavior.
So when you bring that to market, how does that translate into specific positive or attributes that makes your product special? It makes your product, your audience, and your connection with the audience special.
So Veritas is in every single one of our RFPs. It's in more than half of the IOs ultimately. It'll be a significant line item along with other untargeted things. We'll obviously present pre-flight market research. There's surveys that go into making sure that if the client wishes to know certain types of audiences we reach, they're welcome to run those, and we wrap all that up in a post-flight report.
But you also made the decision at some point, or recognized maybe this was just an overwhelming reality. You were never going to get logins. Why? I mean that there's some publishers who were coming into this and saying, look, we need to get their identity. We need to get them logged in. We need to get them subscribed to newsletters. We need their emails. This is how we're going to increase the value of our data, is that kind of PII.
Yeah.
You've made that decision either because it's the nature of your traffic, or it's a waste of time to do that, or to divert too much energy to that?
It's a little both. So we won't contemplate an audience segment less than 1 million, right? So we want to operate at a larger scale. We don't want to find left-handed. It gets too granular at some point. But also, it was where we were strong. Now, I will say, with the acquisition of Quartz, they have a significant number of known users. So we're learning from the folks that are coming over there how they're modeling. They have a platform called Prism that we're going to combine with Veritas, so that we will have models of known users, and then we'll develop that
So actually,
further.
that could be important, having at least that core that you can
Right.
do lookalikes from. You can use their model.
It was definitely part of the roadmap all
extrapolate from
along.
that.
It was
Yeah.
part of the roadmap all along. But I mean, we're again 9 months into this,
Right.
so.
Now, Kodi, yours is now at WAPO. How reliant are you on logins because it's a subscription? I mean, WAPO is subscription.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely focusing on subscriptions and registered users. We have a good amount of both, and that really gives us a great opportunity to have a little bit more deterministic understanding of what people are doing, what are they reading, how are they moving through our content, what do those pathways look like, and then as we continue to grow out our capabilities, we are definitely looking at more addressable, probabilistic lookalike models that can extend, similarly to what Mike was saying, extending into that percentage of unknown users that we have. And, ultimately, I think that there's always going to be, depending on the platform partners that a marketer is using, a different flavor of currency around understanding, the audiences that you're reaching and their behaviors based on, whether or not, it is completely an unknown user base, or if there is some first-party data that can be utilized to create more signal. And what I'm really, focusing my team on as a differentiator is really about leading around these best practices and just executing. I think it's going to be so important for, marketers and publishers to come together and figure out how to just execute time and time again, and not create these bottlenecks of process and these bottlenecks of, how are we connecting our data this time? What are we doing? It has to become almost a reflex and something that can be predictable and scalable. And I think that's going to, help create the certainty around the value of, connecting data and executing against the targeting segments.
What is that going to look like as you bring it to market then? A series of case studies? When you bring it to
absolutely.
market and try to give that sense of predictability to your media buyer, what does that actually look like on the product side?
Yeah, I mean, we got to do the work, right? It's the research. It's really getting crisp around how you're tracking campaign effectiveness, how you're tracking measurement. What does that look like across your audience segments? And really understanding that this is about servicing a funnel. And, it's about, for every marketer that you're working with, it's really understanding their funnel, acknowledging that's what you're helping them with, and really getting down to the nitty-gritty of passing back the value of how you've serviced that funnel through, the data connection, through the audience segmentation that you're then targeting against contextually, and then the intelligence that you can pass back. And, that has to also tie into, what are the marketing opportunities and the formats and things that you're providing that helps to, bring that linear thread all together. The form, function, and exposition.
You might bringing all this to market. What are the key differentiators you're bringing to the market, and the key selling points, and the way you're coming at the market?
Yeah, I think nobody knows our audience better than we do, and we have the insight into our content. I would also say it helps us make decisions around what audiences we need to build that aren't necessarily in market. What content strategies we should develop because of what we're seeing through these platforms. Who
are you competing with, and how are you competing, and what are you aiming your competitive advantage against? And by what I mean by that, are you competing with Google? Are you competing with ad tech? And how are you differentiating among them? Because because you're trying to get that piece of the pie. And I'm trying, as I've been in many ways trying to do for many years, try to understand the ways in which branded media like you guys can really penetrate that market, and how you really differentiate yourselves from the platforms effectively.
I mean, the first thing that came to my mind just now when you asked that question was, I mean, we're competing with the audiences, to some degree, and we're competing with, incentivizing them and giving them enough of a value exchange to pull in their active attention. And I think that's always been a part of, media and journalism in general. With that being said, we are definitely, I think, not competing with other publishers. I think there's an opportunity for, publishers to continue to come together and work together as an industry and to solve problems collectively, together for the betterment of our businesses. But yes, I mean, I think there is a degree of, competition against these massive walled gardens. And, one of the things that I think we're going to continue to see with, cookies going away is the value of these walled gardens increasing, because they're going to have such insulated signal around data and around users. And I think that is something that, all publishers should be thinking about very, very closely.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think we need to do our job of, building the audiences so they come back, giving them reasons to want to authenticate with us, right? Progressive registration walls, whatever you call them. So experimenting with those so you do develop tighter relationships and value adds to the consumers, and then just basically convincing the marketplace that they should spend with us directly and not on the platforms for the same audience.
Yeah, I completely agree. I talk with my team a lot about, yes, data privacy has been, a very huge component of, how we ended up where we are, but that happened because of data abuse. And we don't talk about that how we got here was the abuse of data. And, we all in this room give up data across other platforms throughout our day that we're totally cool with. I mean, if you have an Instagram or Hulu or Netflix account, they have your credit card number, they have your address, they have your phone number, they have your email, they have your first and last name, and we're all totally cool with that. And so how do we incentivize our readers again to want to be more data active? And that's the term that I use with my team. How do we incentivize our platform to allow them to be more data active in a way that they want to be more data active, because they feel in being data active, they're getting something back in return. And so that's what we're all comfortable with already, is that we'll give more data away because we know in doing so, we're getting something back that we value in that exchange. We can't ask people for more data and not give them anything else, in return, not provide something back to them. And so for me, it's around data activity now, because I feel data privacy is a table stakes. I don't think anyone in this room is going to be using data to, in an abusive way to their readers. So now that we know we're going to be data, compliant, how do we now, encourage them to be data active?
By the way, I meant to ask this before, and let me ask you for a quick answer to this. Why did you guys decide to build rather than buy your systems?
Incredible competence in our engineering team. and a lot of the stuff.
Watching, is that it? Is that what
a lot of this technology, I've gone through so many iterations of data warehousing and these type of data systems. I've worked with a number of third parties. I've seen homegrown systems. The technology, either through AWS or through Google Cloud, pick one, it's been commoditized. It's not that hard to work with and not that expensive.
I mean, for us, it's fairly similar. I think, most folks in this room know who our owner is, and, that's a culture of, if it's core to your business, build it yourself. Mm-hmm. And that is something that has permeated across our entire engineering org.
Yeah, and aside from the cost and ease, it's why would you not want ownership? Why would you want to lease that, right?
So coming at it and talking to media buyers from their perspective, one of the problems is the fragmentation of metrics. And then one of the worries is that as we move away from a sort of standardized cookie approach and segmentation approach, they're going to be looking at an even greater morass of publishers with their own segmentation, with their own metrics rules. How do you mollify or talk to this? Because it seems to be a further balkanization of metrics rather than a greater standardization?
Well, this is what we were talking about last night. Like, who
Okay.
owns the taxonomy here, right? Like, is that what you're getting at? Like,
Yeah. Well,
who-
there are how many of them are there now?
Well, I mean-
and in the face of that, why doesn't a media buyer say, "Look, I'm going for scale. I'm
Well, look
why,
what-
why am I bothering? Why do I have to have a spreadsheet with a zillion cells over it with everybody's different metrics and try to guess how these segments match against each other?"
I think we're going to see, particularly in the near term, as these technologies start to, the new technologies start to come out and we're starting to figure out, okay, what are the identity solutions? What are the measurement? We're going to see kind of similarly what's happening in television, where you're going to get a whole bunch of new alternative currencies as people, go into this phase that we're entering into right now, which I think is test and adopt. And I don't think that there is, again, going to be like, oh, this is how you're going to, measure value, because value across the platforms is going to be different depending on signal fidelity around data and how much you can understand from an audience. And so, we were talking last night about this, and I know some folks on the publisher side would love for us to all come together and say, hey, this is what it's going to be. Google, you now have to build a solution in service of how we're defining value and measurement across our platforms and audiences. But, obviously that's, easier said than done.
Can I share a quick anecdote?
Yeah.
So we had last year, Q4, a decent-sized campaign for Acura, $400,000, a lot of custom content, custom video. It ran on Jalopnik, our automotive site. They wanted to target heavy on our automotive enthusiast audience. Fine. So we gave them a line item against our autos audience, and then another line item on untargeted. But since we have our own system always on, we were still able to track and collect metrics on that untargeted segment. Okay, so campaign ends. We look at the performance. Obviously, we're looking at it the whole time. The auto-focused audience segment did fine. It hit all the marks. Untargeted did fine, but when we dug into untargeted, gaming enthusiasts and sports enthusiasts crushed the performance of the autos line item 2x. 2x. They didn't know that. They didn't ask for it. So we came back to them. Jalopnik was already planning an esports vertical for 2022. Guess who's now sponsoring it? So that kind of insight led to awareness that, frankly, the way you're buying audiences now isn't right. Like, we can help you get to the right people based on the performance of your campaigns.
So we not only know our audiences better, we can look deeper into it than you'll get from the platform. Okay, I think that's a really good example of having your own system and the ways in which you can come to market and compete for media dollars is that you can use that level. You have that level of insight to bring to a marketer they're just not going to get from the platforms.
And that's a great example of the power of understanding context and figuring out that context and interest isn't always necessarily going to be a straight one-to-one, but target discovery, I think, is going to be a part of the huge value proposition that all publishers are going to be able to pass back if they can get their insights and intelligence feedback loop set up in a scalable way.
I want to wrap with with a prognostication. 5 years out, as we watch these data structures and the move away and changes in segmentation and data and privacy move out, 5 years out, what do you think is going to be the major impact of all of these changes on digital advertising?
Anarchy.
Won't we be on a beach in the metaverse by then?
If I'm not, I must have missed the boat.
Yeah.
My avatar is ready.
Steve, 5 years out is too hard.
Okay, all right.
So
Revise it.
End of
Change my
23.
question. Go ahead.
End of 23 is going to be a milestone, right?
Okay.
With Chrome, Google and Chrome's specific plans. The response to that, and as you've seen on all the panels this week, where's TV in this? Where's apps? Where's all of those things? It's just evolving too quickly. So, what we're talking about up here is really kind of like .com and, web apps and, website engagement. But, if you look outside of the U.S., it's that type of behavior, especially in Asia, is very low. So stay tuned.
Yeah, I would say definitely what we're going to start seeing, especially in the near term, is a little bit of back to the future, right? I think marketers and publishers are going to want to find opportunities to work together in more simple, less complex, elegant solutions that are repeatable and are easily understood from an execution and a value standpoint. And then as we move into some of these new areas, whether it's Web3 and the metaverse, I think right now it's a really much, again, test and adopt and learn. And a lot of those technologies that are powering those, really hype-filled opportunities and, like NFTs and, the Decentralands of the world, I think a lot of those technologies behind the scenes are going to have very interesting and currently unforeseen applications to not only our industry, but several industries. And I think that just keeping an eye on those things and being open-minded, I think, is going to be important to be able to jump on as soon as those technology applications become self-evident. Blockchain.
We have time for questions. Anybody have any questions for these guys?
Okay. I wanted to know what kind of shift you think you'll see marketer-wise, like advertiser-wise, whether you'll have less CPA or call to action advertisers, D2Cs, and maybe more longer tail ones, because you guys have such strong first-party data that you can actually see over time if the behaviors change or if people are more engaged. Just generally questions for both of you guys, like, is there a shift in marketer type that you think you'll go after or bring in because you're now having control over that first-party data?
Yeah, I mean, the way we look at our marketers, I don't know if everyone remembers that, it's kind of old school, but, the AIDA acronym, awareness, interest, decision, and action. And, for us, it's not about deciding for them which one of those funnels that they want to be active in, but anything you can do to what I, also say to my team, to design the impression to meet this, to suit the needs of that funnel. And if it is something around decision or action, then that is another layer of data that you're potentially pulling back, for the advertiser to help them understand and discover who is their most engaged audience. And so that's something that I always, obviously advertisers are always going to want awareness and storytelling, but how can you marry that into, someone actually swiped or chose which, ad format to look at? What does that tell you about the mindset of the audience that you're reaching for them? And can you let them know, something about that makes them more informed and intelligent about their marketing strategies? So that's definitely something we look for, and it's definitely something that I think more marketers are going to be interested in figuring out, not just, did I get an impression, but did something happen? And it doesn't necessarily always have to be a click-through. I mean, haptics are a wonderful tool to use to pass back intelligence to a marketer.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think with the Acura example, like that was a nice nugget that we discovered, and with more data analysis than the rote campaign fulfillment reports, the more we can dig into the things that we didn't expect to see and share those out. Those inform future opportunities.
Yeah.
Hold on. We got to get
Wait,
you on.
wait for the billions of streamers out there.
We got to get you, millions of streamers.
I'm a little scratchy too. Okay, yeah. Hey, so Kodi, you mentioned the value exchange and trying to get consumers to share more data with the Washington Post. And I'm just wondering, like, as someone who's kind of new to the publishing industry, I'm trying to wrap my head around, and I think Mike from Trusted Brands mentioned zero-party data, right? As opposed to, it's kind of, I don't know if it's a buzzword that's going to stick, but
I call shenanigans on that.
yeah, I mean, it's a good idea, but I don't know. That's another discussion. But are publishers kind of as a whole, is the industry as a whole actively looking at ways to get that kind of zero-party data or get permission-based data sharing from consumers? Is that a trend that you see right now, or is the Washington Post just at the forefront of that?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, I've got feelings around zero-party data, which we maybe shouldn't get into, or maybe don't have enough time to get into this morning. What I will say around just being more active around connecting with your users, and I know marketers, this is something that they're going to have to do too with the with third-party cookies going away, where they didn't have to be so on top of connecting with their customers, because third-party cookie allowed folks to be a little bit lazy. And so taking away the buzz terms around zero-party data and all that, I just look at there are human beings and they're reading our content, and how can we incentivize these human beings with the value proposition of what we're providing to make them feel okay about giving us more data, because they're getting something. They see the difference in, well, if I don't give them more data, then I don't get this valuable experience that I'm looking to have. But I also know that if I do give them this data, they're not going to abuse me with by their misuse of it. And again, I think it's the publishing world is one of the few technology based industries now that is struggling with this the most. I mean, who has an Amazon account? Who has Amazon Prime here? How much do they know about you? We're all pretty cool with it. So, why can't we figure out how to create value exchanges like Amazon Prime, where we feel comfortable, the user feels comfortable being that data active?
Well, get me my shaving cream by 5 tonight, and I'll tell you.
On its way.
Exactly, right. What does that mean for us?
Kodi, Mike, thanks so much. That
Thanks,
was great.
everyone.
I think we
cheers.
did that with